We're Texas CASA, and we're exploring issues in the foster care system that need fixing and proposing solutions. This is The Fix.
My name is Josie Pickens. I'm the Program Director of upEND Movement. A little bit about my background. I come from a community organizing background. I've been doing that work for over 20 years. upEND Movement is an abolitionist-centered national initiative. We collaborate and work with lots of other organizations around abolishing the child welfare system, which we feel is should be more adequately known as the family policing system. Any work that people do to keep families together, to help in communities, whether that is creating or maintaining a food pantry, to figuring out how to offer childcare in a community, that is all abolition work. We are living abolition now. It's not this idea that we just want to dismantle this system and throw this system away without creating care in communities that can support families. I think I understood the way that the child welfare system works and who was harmed by it before, because of course I was doing mutual aid work, and when you're working with families, particularly Black and Brown families and undersourced communities, then you have these interactions with child welfare systems, right? I think our goal was just to try and keep families out of the system by providing as much assistance as we could around housing assistance or food assistance or all of these things that really a lot of times are at the root of families being separated. Because what we know through research is that most children who are separated from their families are not separated because of what we would consider abuse, right? Often it's connected to what we call neglect. And neglect very often is connected to poverty and just needs that aren't being met within the family. Statistics show, for instance, that over 50% of Black children in the US have some involvement with investigation by the child welfare system, which is a crazy number when you think about proportionality to population. When we're looking at Black children, for instance, in the US, and this is national averages, we're looking at about 13% of the population. And then when we start talking about children entering into foster care and being separated from their families, we're looking at somewhere, I believe, around 22-23%, which is almost double what we look at in population. That is something that we see in the state of Texas, but it's also something that we see nationally. If you look at a national map, right? So if you look at a national map and you're looking at other races, even Latinos or indigenous folks, right? There are certain spaces on that map where you'll see a higher disproportionality. But when we look at Black families specifically, throughout the entire United States, we see these disproportionate numbers. I think it's also important, and something that we talk about often at upEND, is disproportionality isn't necessarily a problem that we're looking to solve, because our goal is to not have any families separated. So saying that, we want more white children in the system because there are this many Black children in the system, is not the answer. The answer is to think about why these disproportionalities exist, why these disparities exist. And a lot of times that is because there is just a historical context that we don't necessarily look at that is connected to racism in this country. And so our goal at upEND is to not necessarily think about disproportionality as we were speaking about before, but think about what does it mean to create communities, like I mentioned before, that are well-resourced, communities that have the ability to help families in the way that they need. How do we empower families and communities to take care of themselves. And that is where we feel funding should go. That is where we feel focus should go, instead of focusing on systems and continuously pouring funding and money into systems that we see just continue to present the same, do the same, with the same outcomes, and also harm the same people over and over again. At upEND Movement, Maya Pendleton, who is also one of our founders and just a brilliant woman, came up with this framework tool. And it's a framework tool that really kind of discusses the difference between reformist reforms, meaning reforms that we push for in a system when we're doing advocacy work that really is just going to reproduce the harm that the system is already perpetuating, and adding a little bit of lipstick to it, right? And then you have reforms that are really moving towards shrinking the system, which when we think about shrinking systems, that is also an abolitionist effort, right? Because the less we depend on systems, the more independent families and communities can be. I just want equity where people get to feel safe in their communities. People have all of their needs met within their communities. And then even beyond having their needs met, because I think a lot of times when we think about futures and equity, we think about basic needs. But no, I want more than basic needs. I want nature in communities and beauty, art, and culture that is accessible, like things that can spark joy, and where families not only are able to stay alive and stay together, but that they're able to thrive. And that's my vision. And I believe that it is possible, and I believe that we are already on the way.